which is why we play. I say it all the time. Why do you always? Because it works. If it didn't work, you think we'd be doing this? Do you think we just sit here and rub our hands together and like, bro, they're going to hate it. They're going to hate it. And we're in the make them hate us business, right? I mean, that's what we're in. We're trying to drive away as many people as humans. But and I mean very well. Absolutely murdering. And you know why? Because it's Nirvana and Nickelback and not Gojira. And that's exactly why it works. Why? Say it with me. I've said it a million times, so you should be able to. America is the least metal country on the planet. 9 a.m. this morning, everybody's out to cancel Netflix for a pretty silly reason. We'll get there coming up at 9. Every Monday at 8, we talk to the co-founder of waitingfornextyear.com, my buddy Scott, who can be found on his X platform at WFNY. Scott, how are you this Monday morning?
Another weekend in the books, my friend. Good to be with you.
Yeah, not a bad weekend there, or at least. And we got the Olympics, got Hall of Fame game Thursday. Right now, we're not going to get to see Caleb Williams or C.J. Stroud Thursday night. I would imagine that's probably not going to happen. But NFL season will be getting underway, and the Browns will have their wideout locked up now. Apparently, Amari Cooper is now getting an $18.79 million signing bonus and another $1.21 million in base salary. This deal got done. We thought this deal would get done. And Amari went on to say, Scott, I'm sure you have seen this, maybe other people have not, that he would like to remain a Cleveland Brown forever. He went on to say things like, change isn't really my thing. I don't really like it. I like kind of staying where I am. I kind of like things staying the same and the like. And I kind of like that. I don't know how much of a market Amari would have right now, Scott, but it would be more than probably 3-4 teams. And it used to be, oh, guys don't want to play in Cleveland. And now all of a sudden, guys do want to play in Cleveland. It was good to see this deal get done, right?
Yeah, I mean, textbook restructuring. I think you and I talked about it a little bit last week, where, they signed Jerry, or they trade for Jerry Jeudy, and then sign him to a contract which effectively nets him about $19 million a year, right? And if you're Amari Cooper making 20, it's you start to raise your eyebrow a little bit, right? And and it's not guaranteed, and so they just fully guaranteed the rest of what was remaining, gave him a $5 million bump, so now he's at 25, and that's great, right?
He's happy.
So it's not an extension that he probably wanted, and I think he's saying all the right things to get that. And there's something to be said, like what you mentioned, right? I mean, he kind of bounced around a little bit for the early portion of his career, and when you're an early draft pick, you tend to get drafted by bad teams, right?
And that can happen.
So when he was with the Raiders and stuff like that, I mean,
oh my God, you almost forget about that.
He hasn't exactly been in inside of a program that has, been. When he was with Dallas, it wasn't exactly like they were world beaters at the time.
Not even a little, no.
I think he was a big part of what they did last season.
I agree.
In terms of the winning, and I think he appreciates the culture that Stefanski and team have put together. But I think he also knows that he's 30 years old, and he probably only has one, big contract left in him before the league starts kind of signing him to some of those. I hope they can keep him here, but I think the realities of some of the NFL deals today, I can't say I wouldn't go on a limb saying he's going to be a Cleveland Brown for 2025.
Okay, that's probably fair, as we're talking to Scott from waitingfornextyear.com, and I'm going to keep with the Browns here because this happened since the last time I talked to you. We know the Browns hired an offensive coordinator, Ken Dorsey. There were people, Kevin Stefanski has said from training camp, no.
They don't owe us any. But
I would agree.
Discussed prior, right? And, again, I know for whatever reason some fans, I will say, are clamoring for him to hand off play calling duties. I mean, he was coach of the year last year, and he was one of the best offenses in football,
without a starting quarterback.
Third and fourth string quarterbacks. I mean, So there's a lot to be said for what he was able to produce. I do think Ken will have a lot to do with sort of the planning aspect of it, and the game, and the script, and all of the work that goes into creating the offense for whatever defense they're facing, which I think is great. If they think he could provide value there, I think that's terrific. So, I'm kind of if it's not broke, why fix it sort of guy, and I think you have a head coach who was multiple time now coach of the year and coached his way to an 11-win season last year. I know the defense had a lot to do with it, but they had to kind of duct tape and spit that thing together at the back end of the season. They made it happen.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I've always said about Stefanski, he feels like Andy Reid in Philadelphia, right? Where you can see the greatness on its way. You're dealing with a couple of growing pains and a little errors there. I've always said, Scott, that I'm willing to be patient with a coach because they can coach for 30 years where a player plays for 3. So I'm way more patient with coaches than I am with players. And I think Kevin Stefanski's on his way to being a pretty damn good head football coach. Again, 2-time coach of the year already. Now, the guards feel like they got their little bit of a slide back together a little bit, taking care of Philly. They'll start another series, I believe, with Detroit tonight. And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is the difference between baseball and football a little bit. Because what you don't hear a lot now with the Guardians and the fact that they're pretty good and they're probably going to win the Central and all of this, going to make a push and all that, is in football you hear, imagine if their quarterback wasn't hurt. And yet our starting pitcher, the ace, has been hurt all year, and you don't hear about it inside that sport as much. Is that just something I'm noticing? Is it unfair to the sport? What do you make of that? Because we don't really talk about starting pitching that way.
I think if they make the postseason and they start to get a little bit of a national run, I think you're going to hear a lot about it.
Okay.
I just don't think you're hearing a lot about it right now because we're still sort of waiting for the dust to settle and get all 162 in and see kind of where everybody slots. He was like 3rd or 4th in like Cy Young odds, I think, coming into the season.
Yeah,
that's
what I'm saying. He's good.
It's a legit loss, right? And the offense has bailed them out a lot. I think they took 2 or 3 from Philly, right? If my memory, and that, Philly is one of the best teams in baseball, and they took it to them. And yes, the loss wasn't great, but it's only one loss, and you get the 2 wins out of the way. But I do think, again, we're running up against the trade deadline here, so it'll be interesting to see what they do. But yeah, I do think if once you start to see them on the national stage, if they make the postseason, I do think you're going to hear a lot about some of the injuries that they've dealt with and still figured out a way to continue playing the way they have. But
yeah, that's fair. I didn't think of that.
No, I think kudos to the team, for example. They're not hanging their head on excuses
not at
or
all
anything like that. Like so the fan base, I think, is sort of galvanized around that, and maybe the national folks will mention it. But again, I credit to the team for not letting that derail things, because you lose an arm like that, and this is the first time in a long time that it hasn't been the pitching sort of
right.
Carrying the load here, and if they can get an arm or 2, I think that'd be a nice, at least let the fan base know you're all in on this. Would be a nice way to head into the back end of the season here.
Agreed. Talking to Scott from winningfornextyear.com. Save this for last. As the Olympics underway now, Team USA, there was a lot talked about this basketball team. They didn't look great in some of these warm-up games and a lot of that, but yesterday, taking care of Serbia, I believe it was 110-84, and they look in full command right now. Are you expecting Team USA to win gold?
If they keep playing the way they did. If I can't expect Kevin Durant to play perfectly like the way he did yesterday.
Yeah, he was pretty good.
But all those old guys Joel Embiid was talking about who seem to be playing all right, at least in the early portion of things here. LeBron looked great again.
He did.
He seems like he's in the zone, like it's like playoff LeBron, which is a lot of fun to see. And I thought yesterday could be interesting because Jokic was clearly probably the best player on the floor. 16 or whatever, we're on the USA side. So it was. I thought maybe that if they came out the way they played against South Sudan yesterday, I think that it could have been trouble. But they clearly came to play yesterday, and if they can keep playing at this high level, I think they're going to have gold medals around their neck in pretty short order. Thanks,
man. I appreciate you. I appreciate all the takes, and we'll talk again next Monday. That's Scott from winningfornextyear.com. Find him at the site. Find him on his X at WFNY Scott, my man. We'll talk again Monday.
Thanks, Dan. Always. Take care.
Always good to get your opinion on stuff. Yeah, I kind of agree with him with Team USA. It kind of feels like basketball, maybe more than some other sports. You can kind of flick the switch and kind of turn it on when you want, and it looks like that's exactly what Team USA's plan has been. Well, thanks, Scott from winningfornextyear.com, stopping by the program, as he does per usual, Mondays at 8. Gave us pretty good insight into Kevin Stefanski still calling plays for the Browns after hiring an offensive coordinator. Well, there are coaches that do both. We'll see what happens there. We had been talking about the Olympics, obviously, right? I mean, it's topic A. And we got to talking about Gojira kind of opening things up, metal band, and it's like, oh, they can have that, but we can't have Metallica at the Super Bowl, right? That became a huge part of our conversation. And Metallica has expressed that they're not really interested. Chris reminded us that they got kind of passed over Super Bowl 50 kind of in their backyard. And then James had played, I think, before the Giants game. I think Metallica had played, or at Giants Stadium. They drew a huge crowd, and he kind of said afterwards, we're not mainstream enough, something along those lines. I think a lot of artists don't want to play the Super Bowl because you're not compensated for it. And these days, all it is a reason for everybody to tell you screwed up. And so I think they're having more and more trouble getting people to do it. I could be wrong, but that's kind of how I see that. And so a lot of people made some great, suggestions. Metallica's one of them. Nickelback was one of them. I think if Chester Bennington is alive, it is Linkin Park, and I don't think there's another choice. And I think they would have done it by now. If Chester were alive, Linkin Park is it. I mean, they feel like that's who you get. Having been on the air when they kind of broke out and became the thing, they drove people back to rock stations. Like, they did. People who weren't like rock fans all of a sudden found themselves listening to stations. That's why some other stations started to play in the end, because it was like, oh, look, they have a hit. Let's take it away from them and make rock stations suffer some more. Right? It's always what happens to this. Always. We can't dip into the Taylor Swift pool, but they can take in the end from us. Like, that's, believe me, I've been bitching about it for 30 years. Like, I can't, dude, if I start thinking about it, I get really mad, so let's not do that. I think Linkin Park would have been it. They literally just played the Great American Ballpark the other night in Cincinnati, did they not? So they feel like they could do it. This came in from my Instagram messages. You can find me on Instagram, The Stansbury Show. Nate says, Stansbury, it's tough to beat the Nickelback thought for halftime, but I think Hailstorm would be great too. Probably not as mainstream. All right, what I'll say there is I think Hailstorm is mainstream. I think what you're meaning to say, and I'm not jumping up and down on you about it, I think what you're trying to say there is they're not as big as Nickelback, and that is definitely true. Hailstorm, they're good at what they do. They don't have the songs. Like, they just don't, like, their hits aren't big enough. Much like I said about Usher. Everybody kept telling me all these songs Usher had, and I said, no, he doesn't. Usher doesn't have a ton of songs.
Can I get a sausage, egg, and cheese bagel?
Big songs. His hits were massive.
And that'll be it.
Believe there was 50 of them. Here's a handful. Go back and look at what people were saying by the middle of his halftime performance. What is this? What song is this? What is he singing? I've never heard this. What is this? That's what people were saying. He doesn't have that many songs. What he had was big songs. Hailstorm doesn't have the big songs. They don't. They're good at what they do. Fans of them are going to argue with me. I'm right, they're wrong. They don't have smash hits.
Thank you.
They don't.
Have a good day.
They just don't. They're not quite there yet. Falling in Reverse is closer. That got suggested earlier. I made the same argument with them. They don't feel big enough quite yet. I understand inside that genre of music, they've probably hit that level. For your aunt and uncle, no way. Not even close. Not even close. Nate went on to say, what about Alice Cooper? Okay, so somebody else had said Def Leppard to me. I think it was Lisa on my text line at 330-450-7625. And I gave her an argument for Def Leppard, and I think the same thing is true of, sorry, Alice Cooper. I drew a blank. I had to look at his message again. Sorry. That I went and saw some of those stadium shows that Motley Crue did with Def Leppard. Saw two of them, as a matter of fact. Saw it in Cleveland and Pittsburgh. Def Leppard sounded the best from that stage. It wasn't close out of all those bands. It wasn't, and I'm not even remotely close. Def Leppard sounded amazing. They looked horrific. They don't have the animation anymore. Like, they're old men, and that's okay, because they are old men. They still sounded great. But it was like we walked around the venue and listened to them versus watched it, because it was like, this isn't coming off well as far as a visual goes. Now, I'm at the venue. Meaning you are going to see it way closer on television than you are at the venue. I don't think it looks great on TV. And I'll make the same argument about Alice Cooper. The last time I saw him at Blossom, his band, they were still great. And the show was awesome. I was about in the 5th row. I went with my friend Serene and her husband and a few other of their friends. It was great. We had a great time. They were great. He looks a little like... And I think that matters now with video being circulated all over social media every 10 minutes. We didn't have that when The Who did it. Like, we didn't have that. And I think it changes things. I could be wrong about that, but I think it makes it different. I really do. I think Linkin Park would have been the choice. They would have been the far choice. They're honestly, I think they're a better choice than Nickelback. But Chester. Right? I mean, you can't do it. What are you going to do? You can have somebody fill in. I think that's better at a one-off festival. Here comes the reunion of Linkin Park, and we're going to get 6 people to sing Chester's parts, or maybe we'll have the audience do it, and like a little bit of that. I get it. I don't think that works at the Super Bowl at all. At all. Not even at Super Bowl. It needs to be bigger than that. Dave Grohl feels like it to me. As a matter of fact, that's who I would have got this year. There's been a little fighting. This kind of got memory hold a little bit, but Dave Grohl kind of called out Taylor Swift. She's been all things NFL because of her and Travis, which, by the way, remember when her and Travis were just doing it for the ratings, for the Super Bowl? You insufferable dumbasses. Remember that? They're still together. That's still a thing. Are they doing it for the ratings of the games that aren't on TV right now? Remember? Oh, I do. Oh, I do. So that's almost what I would do. I try to get Tay-Tay out there to sing the national anthem. Little 87 jersey, right? Have her blank space it. And then at halftime, you get the Foo Fighters. And would you look at that? Here comes Taylor for my hero, and they're going to break bread and hug. Right? Like, you could give me a little bit of that. And I think that would be a good choice. The Foo Fighters feel like it. As far as like a band that's active right now, selling out massive venues, they feel like they're big enough. The name is big enough. And even my mom goes, all right, I get what the Foo Fighters are. That to me is it. System of a Down is, I'm getting messages there. I don't see. It's on par with Gojira at the Olympics. I won't argue that. I don't see. Those guys can't get together to make new songs. They don't like one another. Like that band, and a lot of bands are like that, man. A lot of great art comes from that, from people not liking one another. I can't tell you how true that is of radio shows and television shows and bands and movies and directors and artists. Like, great art comes from the push and pull of, I hate you, man, but like, you're good at this. And so, like, they deal with a little too much that inside that band, as it seems like the drummer and the singer cannot get along. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, we need the singer. Who needs the drummer, for crying out loud? Throw him out and get somebody else to bang the skins. We'll be fine. And you most likely would be fine. I don't think System of a Down feels Super Bowl-ish. And I got to be honest with you, as a listener, I think they're one of the most overrated bands of all time. I thought I was wrong about this, and so I tell you guys all the time, like, you know, once a weekend I'll pick a band, and I'm like, I'm deep diving. And I listen to everything, front to back, from their first album to the last, and I do that, and I just listen to everything. I've done it with Sublime to see if I was wrong. I've done it with a lot of bands. I did it with Rush not that long ago. Oh my God, did I find a lot of Rush stuff I absolutely love, right? So I've done this with a lot of bands. It was about 3 weeks ago I did it with System of a Down, and by the time I was done, I was like, okay, so Chop Suey, Sugar, Toxicity, and a few off of Hypnotize, and then after that it was like, dude, most of this is just screaming filler. Metal band Gojira come in. I just don't think they're good enough. I like the songs that I like. They don't really have a ton of them in my view. That's my opinion. I don't know that I'm right about it. I kind of feel like they're a little overrated, but I was like, you know what, dude, let's pull out a little, SO. I don't think they're right for it. Easy answer, they don't seem all that interesting. Before we kind of got into that angle of that, I thought that Linkin Park is the band that jumps to mind.